friends. My name is Ryan. I'm one of the zookeepers here at the Elmwood Park Zoo, and welcome to another week of Camp Keeper. So if you've been here in the last couple of years, you may have noticed lots of improvements and changes as you walk about the zoo. Even very, very recently, we've been improving and modifying some of our exhibits. So we wanted to take the time to kind of highlight some of those. Just kind of going off of a list, in the last year or so changes that we've made, we've renovated our owl exhibit, our cougar exhibit, Penny our alligator, her exhibit, our otter exhibit, our black-footed ferret exhibit. Keepers have done work in the bison exhibit, Gila Monster exhibit, all across the zoo. We've been either contracting work out to improve some exhibits or doing stuff in-house amongst our maintenance staff and our keeper team. Today, we're actually going to be highlighting something that we just finished maybe within the last month. And that is our Gila Monster exhibit. We've done a lot of work into that space, so we'll be talking about that. But when you're renovating it and modifying exhibits, there's a couple key things that you want to be thinking about. You don't want to just wing it because you never know what you're going to get. So you want to think about the animal that's going to be living in that space, both as a species and their natural behaviors in the wild, but also as an individual. Like, we're all unique. Each animal has a unique kind of behavior. And you want to think about how they may interact with their space. You want to think about the space that you have, because as much as we would love to have unlimited space to be able to do as much as we want, a sprawling exhibit, sometimes that's just not possible. So you want to try to get all you can out of what you have available to you. You want to think about the materials that you have and the future plans for that space. When we try to renovate things, we try not to be like short thinking. We try to think long term of like, okay, well, what else could live here? Could we do something else? Could we add species to this exhibit? And if we can improve and renovate on that, then we'll try to do that. And that's really most of the focus of what you're trying to do. So for our Gila Monsters, which we can kind of pan over here and take a look at them, we have two Gila Monsters. We have Napoleon and Dynamite. Both of them came from the San Diego Zoo. Napoleon is 11 years old and Dynamite is 12 years old, and they are spectacular individuals. They're spectacular Gila Monsters. They're just little pancakes. Gila Monsters in the wild spend like 95% of their time underground, and they'll come out for feeding and also basking in the sun. Our individuals are quite large, but when they're eating, they're carnivores, so they eat nothing but other animals. They're meat eaters, and mostly these guys are raiding nests. So when they are underground, they'll come up and raid birds' nests, mammal nests, and eat their eggs and their babies. So they'll am I gonna lose my track of thought because it's so hot? Sorry, friends. But most of the time is spent underground. And so we tried to keep that into consideration when we were renovating their space. We basically completely overhauled this exhibit. So if you have ever been here before and you've seen it, this was designed for black-footed ferrets, which we still house, but we house them on the lower portion down below. And we actually have Ray, our brand new black-footed ferret. He's sleeping over there. We just got him a couple of days ago. He's pretty spectacular. And then Ka next door is also, he's actually active. He's not sleeping right now. But the whole exhibit here used to house our black-footed ferrets, and we decided that we wanted to kind of diversify it. So initially we brought our Gila Monsters, and they just lived on the right-hand side over here. And then there was a dividing wall in between here, and for a long time, nothing lived in this space over here. And so we kind of sat down and fleshed out a plan on kind of what we wanted it all to look like, and talked amongst ourselves, different things we wanted to incorporate and change. And even as we were working on it, we were adding things and changing the plans. But we removed the Gila Monsters during a lot of the demo. So we knocked out the wall that was right here in the middle, which made a huge mess. And then we basically did fake rock work all throughout the exhibit, at least on the left-hand side. We kind of stole tactic out of people who do like aquarium setups and stuff. So initially what we did is we took foam and we built foam up all over the place in this exhibit. And after we had everything kind of set and staged the way that we wanted to, we carved the foam to kind of look kind of like the rock work that we have here, and shaped it into what we kind of wanted it to look like. And then once that foam was all carved out and mapped out, we used a vertical concrete called Buddy Roads that a couple of us had gotten to work with by going to conferences. And it's a really awesome material that sticks to vertical surfaces really, really efficiently, up to like 3 inches. And so we were able to use that then and kind of map out and put it on all of the foam that we had laid out to build all this rock work that you guys see in front of you. So nearly everything that's on camera right now, all these rocks, is just foam carved to look like a rock and then concreted on top of that. We kind of hid some PVC pipes throughout all of the foam, so that way we could incorporate plants later, so that we planted all this up really, really thoroughly. And then we also had built, kind of up in the top area here, a heat box that we can house a heat bulb in. We recently have been improving all of our reptiles' UV and heat. We've found some really awesome bulbs from Acadia Lighting that are deep heat bulbs, and they act a lot more like the sun. So your traditional heat bulbs really provide a lot of surface heat. They'll heat like a surface, like if you were to lay underneath a heat bulb that was from traditional, it would heat up like the surface of your skin, and actually might even burn you. Plenty of animals get unfortunately burned on those. But this deep heat bulb, it actually penetrates much deeper, much like the sun would, and you don't end up having that surface heat anymore. It's more heat. Like if you ever sat out in the sun, it kind of gives that feeling to these guys. So we made things a lot more natural for these guys, which is what we strive to do every single day. So we also incorporated a pool that's over there. I'm sorry to our camera person who is bouncing all over the place. But previously what we were doing for the Gila Monsters is we were giving them a tub of water every single week, and that was how they soaked themselves. Sometimes they would drink out of it, but they had their own bowls to drink out of. And we decided that we wanted to incorporate a pool into their exhibit. And we actually did that while we were building it. It wasn't initially in the plans. So we built them a foam pool, same kind of thing, same kind of rock work idea, and then we epoxy coated it to prevent the water from leaking out. And now they have a really nice little pool over there that we can fill up. We have some plumbing running to it, so we can easily drain it, and they get that every single week. We change that out for them. Now, the space that we're looking at over here, we didn't really do much renovations over here, and we did that kind of on purpose. So, as keepers, we change out enrichment and furniture for our animals all the time. And by leaving this space open, it allowed us to first off, put a really deep layer of sand down, so that way our Gila Monsters could exhibit more natural behaviors. Like I said, they live primarily underground, so it allows them to kind of dig down. We have a bunch of hides over here for them as well, so they can, if they wanted to, they can dig under these hides that we have and really kind of burrow themselves down. It helps keep them cool too if they're underneath those spaces. And then because it's basically a blank slate, us keepers can add furniture, add enrichment, move things around, and we really can do a whole bunch of stuff over here now that we have the space available to us, which before, when they just lived over here, we were trying to do everything in this space as far as like moving furniture, giving them enrichment, and then giving them more complexity. And it was just a whole lot to do in this exhibit. So by doubling it in size, it allowed us to do a whole lot more and it improved a lot of our things. So I have some pictures from like previous exhibit designs that we have. So I talked about how when you're like designing exhibits, you kind of make a plan, you flesh out ideas. We have some like professionally done drawings from other facilities, not so much here. And these are professionally done. These you would, if you have a contractor doing or a construction company doing it. In-house, we have a lot more amateur drawings, but they function just the same. So, like, we'll take, paper here in the Keeper staff. We'll just like take a regular piece of printer paper and just kind of draw out an idea of maybe what we want to see, and then sit down and kind of chat and talk about it. So I had talked a little bit briefly about space and complexity of the exhibit and kind of what we have available to work with. And space is not everything. So there are plenty of examples where an animal has sprawling exhibits, like hundreds of acres, but there's no complexity to it. And so there's nothing incentivizing the animal to really want to go and anything. So they actually tend to just hang out wherever they get food and water, and that's where they live, like all day long. We've seen it across plenty of facilities, sanctuaries, zoos. So if you can give some complexity to exhibits where an animal can interact with it in a lot more robust way, then you get them using the whole space instead of using just a piece of the space here and there. So kind of doubling the space for these guys, but then also having all this rock work here, it allows them to maneuver their exhibit and kind of be in just totally different areas, between rocky to sandy to in a pool. And they do use all of their exhibit space here. There's actually one spot that we left open. We didn't do anything at all. There's a planning pocket. We're gonna come over here on the other side. There's a planning pocket in the back right corner here that Napoleon, who's actually the one laying in this exhibit, loves to just kind of cram and squeeze himself into that little planning pocket. There have been some times where we come down here and he's just poking his head out the top, and that's all you can see is just his head. The rest of him is just buried down in that planning pocket. So I'm really happy that he's been enjoying that. And I'm bouncing all over the place, so I'm sorry, but Napoleon and Dynamite, if you're looking at them and you're really trying to think like who's who, the easiest way to tell is the lines on their head. So Napoleon in front of us, he has nice solid lines on his head, where Dynamite, who of course she squeezed herself back behind some plants. So from your guys' angle, from here we probably can't see her too well, but the lines on her head look like they exploded like Dynamite. So that's the easiest way to tell them apart. And our Gila Monsters, I had mentioned earlier, are quite large. You can tell their body condition, basically how well fed they are, by their tails. So Gila Monsters are very well adapted to the desert. They live in the southwestern United States and down into Mexico. And they don't really find food sources very frequently. So they will typically eat a whole bunch, gorge themselves, and then store all those calories in their tails. And their tails can swell up and get quite large from that. And it's just all fat reserves. And then they basically will use those reserves as nutrients if they can't find a food source. And they can depend on that for months before they find another food source. So if you can look at our guys have quite fat tails. They are very well fed. Napoleon actually has a smaller tail than Dynamite. I wish she was kind of hanging out in a place where we could see her. She loves her snacks and frequently eats. And if we wouldn't stop her, she would just keep on eating. Now, because they're desert species, Gila Monsters also have a pretty unique adaptation to help them when there's not water around, to kind of get them through the rainy season. So they have a really awesome bladder that basically acts as a canteen that they can take from for a long period of time. So if they fill their bladder and get a nice big drink, they can actually go up to 80 days without drinking. If they have an empty bladder, it's much less, like 20 to 30 days. but that actually helps get them through the dry seasons when they're down in the desert, because rain is far and in between, and they don't get as much opportunities to drink as plenty of other animals.
So I have a couple questions if you have a chance to answer them, Ryan.
Yeah, of course.
So what kind of considerations do you have to take into with viewers? So when people come to the zoo, when you're designing an enclosure, an exhibit, how does that affect how you might arrange things or plan an exhibit?
Yeah, so the big thing is, like, one, is it going to be really blocking our guest view from the animal? Because you don't want to put, a giant shelter, right in front of the exhibit, and then just blocks everything. So we try to build big things in the back and little things more in the front, unless it's built in a way that's not going to block people's view from seeing the animals. We also, like, if it's something that you're building into an exhibit that's going to be really fun for the animal and they're going to use a lot, we want it to be in a space that's easily viewable. So, like, you can build a shelter for an animal, but that is kind of hard to see in. You don't want to put it all the way in the back of the exhibit, because then no one's going to see that animal ever. They're going to live in it all the time. And we've had some of those hurdles here at our zoo that we've had to overcome, where we built something and then the animal, of course, interacts with it in a way that, like, is unexpected, and then, of course, you have to, like, change it to try to accommodate for those things. Nothing ever works out the way you necessarily want it to work out. That's a good question.
Yeah, and so what parts did the keepers redo the design work in the back too, like the mural and things like, is pretty much everything that we see right now that was renovated keeper work?
Yeah, sorry I didn't get to touch on that. Everything in this exhibit, we basically gutted and did it. So I'm gonna name drop him because he's fantastic, but Tim, one of our keepers, painted the mural on the back of this exhibit, and he did such a wonderful job on doing all of that. And then, like I said, we did all of the rock work in here, knocked out a wall, basically completely gutted this space for our Gila Monster friends.
Is there some part of exhibit design that you really, really love to do? Like, what's the most rewarding thing for you when it comes to kind of planning out and arranging an exhibit?
Yeah, so there's probably the most fun part is the planning, and then the kind of building and seeing it go. Because if you basically can, once everything's approved and a go, like, you can just go for it, and that's something that's great about our facility in particular, that we get that support to really go for it and utilize the skills that we have to improve all of our animals' spaces. I would say probably my favorite is building it. But then, when it's all done and your animals go in there and you get to see how they interact with it, it really confirms, like, and makes you happy that, like, all that work you did is appreciated.
I think we're good if you want.
Good. Well, thank you guys for joining us for another week of Kamp Keeper. And if there's any questions, we'll try to respond to them in the next 30-ish minutes. But we'll see you guys next week.